welcome back to the Aussie Grid Girl podcast. I believe this is now episode 3. It is only the second video episode, but it is episode 3. It is the second video, and I think our setup looks a lot nicer now than it did when we did our last video. At least I like to think so. I'm repping my boy Sebastian Vettel today because I was going to wear my Max Verstappen shirt, but then the orange looked really bright on camera. Also, I'm just going to point this out. I am a blonde. My hair is not ginger. I know it looks ginger, but I'm not ginger. I'm blonde, I promise. So today we are going to be talking about the last 2 Grand Prix that we have had, which was Baku and Miami. We're going to talk about them in order, but I might jump back and forth, so I apologize in advance for that. I know that sometimes I talk really fast, but nobody's told me that it's a bad thing yet, so we'll see. First off, I just want to talk about if you didn't watch Baku and you didn't watch the F2s at Baku, I recommend you go back and find it and you watch it, because on the last couple of laps there was this so they finished in pit lane on a safety car, the F2s, because it was a mess. So basically what happened there is one of the cars crashed into the wall and then someone went under him, and he was kind of up in the air like that, the Alpine livery car. I can't remember who was driving it though, it's completely gone out of my head. But hopefully we know that the drivers were okay. It definitely could have been a lot worse than it was, thank God. I think that really puts to use the fact that we have the halo, and the halo is saving lives, because it could have been very, very bad. It could have been bad, but it wasn't, because of the halo and everything that we have now in terms of safety features in F1 cars. But let's talk about the F1s in Baku, because as if Pierre Gasly didn't have enough of a horrible outing in Melbourne with his crash with his teammate, which was literally, there's a meme going around, I'm sure everybody's seen it, where it's like a copy and paste of both of the Alpines on the side of the track in Melbourne when they crashed into each other. Because, Pierre I think it was in FP2, or it might have been FP1. I think it was in FP1. His car was on fire. Just completely in flames. Apparently it was an issue with the car. They couldn't really work out where the leak was coming from, it was a fuel leak or an oil leak, but he did have to get out of that car pretty quickly because it was completely ablaze. So as well, in Baku we had our first sprint weekend. Now, I'm a big fan of the way that they've done the sprints this year, so I definitely appreciate the fact that we have FP1 on Friday and then we have qualifying for the race on Sunday. So we have qualifying for the race on Sunday, on Friday, after practice. And I know a couple of the drivers got asked after the first race if they thought that there was too many practice sessions. I know that George Russell and Nico Hulkenberg both agreed that there was too many practice sessions and they didn't feel like they needed that many. So we had FP1 on Friday and then we had qualifying for the race on Sunday. Now, massive props to the Alpine mechanics for being able to fix Pierre's car in time to have it out for qualifying. Definitely didn't think that they were going to be able to repair it, because it did take a while to get the car back to the garage. But again, massive props to the Alpine mechanics. Pierre, I hope you bought your team something nice. And then in qualifying, I was so happy during qualifying, you guys. I was so happy. Do you know why I was so happy? Because I do still have my Ferrari flag here. I know it's upside down, but it's because it's on the back of my chair. Charles completely blazed it in qualifying and put it on pole for the race on Sunday. So I was really excited, because Charles on pole was not something that I thought that we were going to get this year, especially after all the drama that happened in Melbourne with him DNFing in turn 3. And then there was, a points finish in Saudi, which was great. And then obviously he DNF'd in Bahrain as well. So poor Charles has not had a very good start to his season this year. But Baku, he was on pole. Hell yeah. Was really excited about it. Really excited about it. More so because he was on pole. And he was on pole for the 3rd time in a row in Baku. 3 years in a row on the podium. Not on the podium, unfortunately, but 3 years in a row on pole. Like, I'm sorry, that's a hell of an achievement. So congratulations, Charles. Good on you. And then we came to Saturday. So the way that Saturdays run now is they have the sprint qualifying, which is like, I think they get an hour, and it still works like Q1, Q2, and Q3 for the sprint race for their qualifying. However, the sprint qualifying is, the rules are, if you make it into Q3 in a sprint race qualifying session, you have to use new soft tyres. So as we found out on Friday, regardless of whether Lando and Yuki were able to progress to Q3 for the sprint, they weren't going to be able to participate anyway because they didn't have fresh tyres. They didn't have a set of fresh soft tyres that they could run on, so it was kind of irrelevant. I don't think it mattered in the end anyway because neither of them made it. And if you saw the race and if you saw everything that went on, Yuki and his car were not having a great weekend, and it was so unsafe that they put him back out on the track in qualifying for the sprint race because he was literally like driving in a straight line but on an angle. Like, there was issues with that car that shouldn't have happened. Like, it was just bad. The fact that they let him go on, I'm not really sure how that happened, why it happened, but it was so unsafe and it shouldn't have happened in the first place. And then we come to the end of qualifying for the sprint race, and Charles Leclerc on pole again, completely smoked both the Red Bulls. So, yeah, I was really excited about it, you guys. So, we had 2 Charles Leclerc poles in Baku. And that's about where the good things sort of ended for him. The sprint race was great. I'm very aware that the Red Bulls are faster than the Ferraris. Let's be honest, the Red Bulls are faster than 99% of the paddock. So it was not like they were ever going to be anywhere other than at the front. Charles was just very lucky that he managed to hold on to his P2 in the race and got on they didn't really have a podium ceremony, but he did finish second in the sprint race behind Perez, and Checo just breezed past him. And honestly, Charles was lucky that George Russell crashed into Max Verstappen and put a massive hole in his side pod. If you haven't seen it, like, it's a giant hole. Like, look at this. There's a massive hole there. Like, that's what happens when George Russell crashes into you. If you were reading the media reports or if you were watching the race, you saw everything that happened post-sprint qualifying with Max and George having a little bit of a altercation, and Max calling George a dickhead and basically saying, expect the same from me next time. Which, not very sportsmanlike. There is a reason why Max has a reputation of being a hothead. However, I do adore him. I do love Max Verstappen. I think he's very, very talented, and his performance in Miami just completely proved that, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then, so we had the race on the sprint race on, not the sprint race, we had the main race on Sunday in Baku. And my favorite thing about Baku is the time zone. So the race was on at 9 p.m. on Sunday night, which meant that me in Australia, I could watch it at 9 p.m. on Sunday night and not have to get up at some ridiculous hour in the morning or stay up super, super late to watch the race, which is usually what ends up happening when a race is anywhere but in Australia. I'm so sorry I keep yawning, you guys. It's been a long couple of days for me. So Charles being on pole in Baku for the race was great, but as we kind of saw from the sprint race, there was no way that he was going to keep that position, which is a shame. Like, props to Red Bull and whatever the hell it is that Adrian Newey is doing. That means that they're so much faster than everybody else. I would love to sit down with Adrian Newey and just be like, can you talk me through step by step the design of the car and why it's so fast and just how it works? Because I'm genuinely interested. I want to know why they are so much faster than everybody else. Like, it just, I can't wrap my tiny brain around it. Like, I don't have a mechanical brain at all. So sometimes things go completely over my head. But that's one of those things where I would just love to, sit and have a conversation and get a better understanding of how everything works in an F1 car. I think it's really interesting. And I think it's just the fact that the Red Bulls are as fast as they are, like, nobody's going to be able to catch up to them as much as we wish that they could. Like, both of them still finished a good 21 seconds ahead of Charles LeClerc. And again, Charles was very, very lucky to hold on to that third place because Alonso was right on his tail pretty much the whole time. There is, of course, the conspiracy theorists out there that believe that the reason why Checo won was because Red Bull screwed Max out of his podium, which obviously we know that that's never true. Like, when people say that about the teams, that they favour one driver over another, like, get serious, you guys. Like, get real. It's, to a point, it is a team sport, but it's also, an individual sport. But it is a team sport, and teams aren't going to favour one driver over the other. As much as we can go back and look in the past, and we can look at Nico and Lewis's rivalry, and we can look at Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber and Multi-21. If you understand what Multi-21 is without me having to explain it, you get what I'm talking about. If you don't understand what Multi-21 is, one day I will explain it to you. Today is not that day. But, you can't really say that any team particularly favours one driver over the other. And can we just talk about Fernando Alonso for a moment? Like, he was being... I don't know where this has come from, because he was never this way with Esteban, and he's never really been this way in the past either, but he's so supportive of Lance in Baku. Like, he told them something about his, the way that his car was set up, and was like, did you guys tell Lance what I said about this? Like, it really works. And to see them working as a team, and like Fernando kind of stepping into that role of a mentor for Lance, makes me really happy. Lance doesn't necessarily need someone to take him under his wing now. He's sort of past that point because he's a little bit older. Not that any of the F1 drivers are that old. I'm still older than 75% of the grid. But it is really cool to see Fernando kind of take on that role and just be like, I want to look after you. I'm going to protect you. And then you had Sainz in the points as well, which again is brilliant to see. He would have had a points finish in Melbourne, but we all know how that ended. And just massive props as well to Oscar Piastri, who was ridiculously unwell with food poisoning whilst in Baku. I think he was saying that he lost something like 4 kilos in a weekend just because he was so ill and he was barely eating. So good on him for... being able to be in the car and to race. There's a reason why they have reserve drivers, and it's because when people are sick and they can't drive, they can put somebody else in that seat and they can still have 2 cars running in a race. And the fact that he finished just outside the points for 11th is a massive deal, and he did have a bit of a back and forth going with Yuki Tsunoda during the race, which was great. And then one thing that I really want to talk about Baku was the whole situation at the end of the race with Esteban Ocon. Now, I don't know if everybody watched the race. If you didn't watch the race, what you missed out on was the fact that Esteban managed his tyres so well that he did not need to pit for fresh tyres until like lap 58, which was the last lap. And to be fair, I'm looking at it now, he finished like 91 seconds after Max did. But that doesn't excuse what happened, because what happened was really fucking dangerous. Mind my language, I'm so sorry. But when you have camera people and officials and mechanics and people in the pit lane, as a driver is coming into the pit lane, it is so dangerous. Like, the fact that they are still going 80 Ks in pit lane because that's the speed limit doesn't make it any less safe to people to be walking around the fact that he had to brake so hard, it just goes to show about F1 drivers and their awareness. The fact that he was so aware that as soon as he saw people and was like, what the fuck is going on, he was able to slow down and not hit anybody. But that could have been devastatingly dangerous. The FIA have now said that nobody can be out in Parc Ferme and in pit lane until the last driver has crossed the line. Which, it's going to make a difference in so many ways, because it means that they can't have Parc Ferme set up straight away, because even though the drivers can come in, they can't have people there, because it could have been really bad. Like, people could have died, and people could have had broken limbs, and it wouldn't have been anybody's fault. It wouldn't have been anyone's fault. Like, it wouldn't have been Esteban's fault. It would have been, like, other people's fault. But it was so dangerous, like, watching it and sitting here and watching it on TV and going, oh my God, like, it was so dangerous. And just, I can't wrap my head around how something like that happens either, because it could have been so much worse than it was. Thank God for people with quick thinking, and thank God for the drivers being as good as they are, and thank God for the cars being able to stop the way that they do, because it could have been bad. Now, I know people are getting sick already of Verstappen and Checo and Alonso on the podium. Thank God we didn't get Alonso on the podium in Baku. We had Charles on the podium. He didn't look happy to be there. He was not impressed with his car. And look, I don't blame him. Like, I completely understand where his frustration is coming from. The fact that the car was so good last year and he was so good last year. And I say he was so good because as much as Ferrari are Ferrari, and I do, like, I support the team because I support Charles and I support Carlos, but I don't know what's happened this year, whether it's just having Fred instead of Mattia and a couple of other, like, staffing changes that's affecting it. But I don't understand what's happening at Ferrari with the way that the cars have been made this year, because they're shit. I'm sorry, I've referred to it a couple of times as this, but the Ferraris this year are bright red shit boxes. Like, they are, because they're just, yeah, I don't know. I think Baku favoured them because they do have straight line speed, and there is a couple of quite long straights on that track, but it clearly didn't translate. My God. I don't know if you guys heard that. The apartment above mine is owned by the hotel that I live next door to, and people are rearranging furniture or something up there. I don't know what's going on, but there was a big thump. Anyway, back to what we were talking about Baku and how shit the Ferraris are. And then we went straight from Baku to Miami. Now, I don't know if anybody saw, I know I've seen it a bunch of times on TikTok, but Charles lost his AirPods at the airport in Switzerland. And I don't know where, but he had these massive, like, tongs that were probably, like, this big, that he managed to get, like, down the gap where he lost his AirPods and get his AirPod and his AirPod case back. I don't know how the hell he lost them down there in the first place, but with half an hour before his flight, that's what he was doing on his, like, stomach, trying to find his AirPod. It's hilarious. Go watch it. I will pin it in the comments. I'll pin a link to it on TikTok. And I've also reposted it on my TikTok, which is Little Rockin' Emo, by the way, if you haven't looked at my TikTok, which is Little Rockin', ROCKIN, and then Emo, which I'm debating changing to the Aussie Grid Girl, but I post other stuff on TikTok that is not F1 related, so I don't want to kind of, like, mix that up. But yes, I will pin it on, I will pin the link to that TikTok in a comment underneath this video. And if you're just listening to this and you're not watching it, if you go to my TikTok, I've reposted it. I repost a lot of F1 stuff on my TikTok. It's pretty much the only place where I do repost, aside from how much I talk about it on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, etc., etc. We're in Miami. There's been a lot of controversy about Miami and about influencers who know nothing about Formula One and who know nothing about racing that were invited to the Grand Prix in Miami. And, like, I get that they're trying to hype it up, and that's cool. Like, whatever. If you're an influencer and you get invited somewhere, you're not really going to say no, especially when it's free PR for you and for whatever event it is that you're at. But if you're going to go, like, at least look up some information about Formula One and about the drivers before you go. Please. Because there's people like myself, and I have other friends in the States that would have loved to go that just couldn't afford it, or it was in a really awkward spot, so it was hard to get to. But yeah, just speaking of Miami though, the fact that they had the paddock inside the stadium was really cool. Like, the paddock looked awesome, even with its fake grass. The paddock looked really cool. And the track in Miami is a weird one. Like, it's only the second time that we've raced in Miami, and we still have a stupid fake marina with fake water that was supposedly going to have real water this year that definitely did not have real water this year. It's a little bit weird. Definitely look at pictures of the track, because, like, the fake marina thing, like, it's weird. It looks ridiculous with the fake water. Like, I get that they're trying to be cool or whatever, but it looks stupid. And Miami was an absolute disaster from being a Ferrari fan from my point of view. We were really excited, obviously, because Charles was on pole twice in Baku, as I talked about, and, you know, was on the podium. And just nothing in Miami. It physically pained me to watch Charles Leclerc down in 7th, battling with Kevin Magnussen in a Haas. Guys. The guy that should have won the championship last year if Ferrari didn't make stupid decisions. Battling a Haas for 7th, and he finished in 7th. And the fact that Sainz also finished in 5th, but got completely breezed by George Russell and Fernando Alonso. It was just, Ferrari, can you get your shit together, please? Because I cannot take a whole year of you being as shit as you are right now. It is not Carlos's fault, and it is not Charles' fault. It is Ferrari. I am blaming the car. I'm blaming the choices made by the engineers. I'm blaming the decisions made by the team bosses. It is not the drivers. Both of those drivers are better than the cars that they're in. And you can argue with me on that if you like. That's fine. I don't mind. But it just doesn't make sense, okay? But speaking of Ferrari and of Charles and Miami, the fact that he crashed in the same place in FP3 and in qualifying really, really makes me question things. Thank God that it wasn't bad damage, so they didn't have to completely, like, redo the car, and there wasn't extra penalties. But the fact that in qualifying, Max pulled out of a lap because he had a bit of a wobble. I think there was a cross breeze coming across the track that was making things difficult in certain spots. So Max didn't set a time in qualifying, so he started in 9th, and Charles started in 7th because the session got red flagged because of Charles crashing, and they just didn't have enough time to run Q3 again. And I was having a discussion with somebody the other day, actually, about should drivers have their times deleted if they cause a red flag in qualifying? Because I believe that's how it works in IndyCar. I'm not completely across IndyCar as a sport. I should watch it more. Roman Grosjean, Marcus Ericsson, they're pretty much reason enough for me to watch it. But I believe in IndyCar, if you cause a red flag, your time gets deleted. Which it could work. I get it. It could work. I don't really think that it should apply in Formula One because they have to kind of keep the disciplines different. But I can see where the argument is coming from. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. or send me a message on Twitter or on Instagram if you have a thought and you want to talk about it, or if you have a question and I can bring it up on the next episode of the podcast, which I am going to go back and finish talking about Miami real quick. But the fact that we have 3 back-to-back, we have Imola, we have Monaco, and we have Spain coming up in the next 3 weeks. I will try and get a video up in between those races, but odds are I probably won't. I will do an extra long episode again after Spain, between Spain and Canada, because it is quite difficult for myself and for my editor, thank you, Trent, to get such quick turnaround when the races are close together. Maybe we can do like a YouTube live or a Twitch stream or an Instagram live or a TikTok live, and we'll talk about the races then. But otherwise, the next episode of the podcast will be after Spain and before Canada, just because there's 3 back-to-back and I'm not going to have time to record and edit and post in between as much as I would like to. And I'm probably going to cry watching Monaco, because with the way that the season is going, Charles is going to have another shit home race, which he does not deserve. I want him to have a good Monaco for once. Just, he needs to break this Monaco curse and have a good race. But anyway, back to Miami. Look, I'm not a big fan of the track. It's a weird track. It's a weird shape. It's like got hills. It's just weird. It's just weird. We've already got 2 other races in America. We've got COTA in Houston, and then we've got, well, we have Vegas this year, which will be interesting. And we have Miami. Like, it's great that the sport is growing in America. I love that the sport is growing in America, because Formula One hasn't really been a sport that has been popular in the States. Like, obviously, Daniel Ricciardo loves America, and America loves Daniel Ricciardo. But it's not really... It's slowly taking off in America. However, if you haven't seen this and you want to make yourself cringe, go and watch it and look at LL Cool J introducing the drivers before the race in Miami, because it was so cringe. Like, everybody except, pretty much everyone except Logan Sargent looked like they just did not want to be there and they wanted it over and done with, which I completely understand. It was not good. Let's not do that, please. Let's not do the way that they did it in Miami ever again, because it was embarrassing and it was awful. But now, I know people are going to say, it's the Red Bull, it's the car. Okay, sure, the car is fast. However, you can still be in a fast car, like a Formula One car, and not be very good at it. Nick De Vries, I'm looking at you. Just as an aside about Nick De Vries, he is showing why he is 28 and only just making his Formula One debut. Now, again, feel free to argue with me about this, and I love healthy discussion. Just don't come after me and call me a DTS fan, because I'll get really upset. I'm fragile, guys. He's not performing for the 4 races of the season that we've had. 5 races. 5? Is it 5 or 4? 5 races that we've had this season so far. I think, are we up to 5, or are we on race 4, or are we on race 5? Oh god. Miami was race 5, because we had Bahrain, Jeddah, Melbourne, Baku, Miami. Okay, we are on race number 5. Okay. I had a full, my brain stopped working then, you guys. We're on race 5 and he's just not performing. I have a theory about it. We're going to talk about that theory in a second after I finish talking about the race in Miami. You can say it's the car that is why he is so good, but you can be in a fast machine and not be a good driver. However, Max Verstappen is in a fast machine and is a great driver. The fact that he went from 9th to 1st on a track that is not necessarily the easiest to pass on, congratulations. I'm sorry, you can't... I know people don't like Max, and I understand it. I understand not liking somebody. I'm completely fine with not liking somebody. I've encouraged this before. You're allowed to have thoughts and opinions. You're allowed to not like things, and you're allowed to not like people. I still don't like Lewis Hamilton. I probably never will like Lewis Hamilton. Nothing particularly against him. He just rubs me the wrong way. Kind of George Russell does as well. But props to Max for doing what he did. He and Fernando were saying in the cool-down room that he was going to pass Fernando on, like, lap 25. Yeah, he did it on, like, lap 14, and managed to go from 9th to 1st and win the race. So, good on you, Max Verstappen. Congratulations. It was a brilliant drive. The kid knows how to handle the car, and he does. As I said, you can say that it's just the car that is the reason why he is so good, but... And, look... That may be true. I'd love to see how he goes in a Ferrari, maybe if you put him in this year's car and see how he goes. But still, props to him. I think it was a brilliant drive. He deserved that win. He worked his ass off and did an amazing job and won the race. Like, it was great. Perez came home with 2nd. Those two, I don't know how the championship's going to go from here. Like, I think that Checo is going to be the first person in a long time that is going to give Max a run for his money. Like, Checo and Charles were both fighting last year for 2nd in the championship, which clearly isn't going to happen this year. But Checo is going to be the one that really, really gives Max a challenge. And I think that that's great for the sport as well, is seeing someone in the same machine being a competitor for his teammate. Like, I think it's great. It's going to be really fun to watch those two throughout the season, to see them where they go. Max is leading the championship currently, but as I said, we're only 5 races in. And Checo is great on street circuits, and we've still got a couple of those to go. So it'll be really interesting to see what Checo does. And I know at the end of last year there was a little bit of controversy, like on a personal level between the two of them. They seem to be doing great now, and my theory was at the end of last year that the reason why they brought Daniel Ricciardo back was because if Checo didn't perform this year, they were going to boot him and put Daniel in that car next year regardless of the contract. But I think Checo is very much proving that he deserves to be in that car. He deserves the Red Bull spot. And he keeps improving week after week after week and just absolutely gunning it. And like, good on him. It's, as I said, I know I repeat myself a lot. It's great to see him doing so well, especially considering he's been involved in Formula One for so long. And there was a point where we didn't know if we were going to still have Checo because he was out of contract when Force India became everything else, and with all the changes around the teams and when it became Aston Martin from Racing Point and all that sort of stuff, we didn't know where he was going to go. And the fact that Red Bull gave him that olive branch and he's performing, good on him. And Alonso is, again, just absolutely smashing it at the moment. I really wish that last year, the Aston Martin last year was the Aston Martin that we have this year in terms of the car, because I feel like Seb could have really given Max a run for his money as well for the championship if we had this car last year. But talking of Fernando and being a team player, he was quite a way back behind Max and Checo. Checo still finished like 5 seconds behind Max. Alonso finished 26 seconds behind him. And then George Russell was 33 seconds behind. So there wasn't really, like, George and Fernando weren't really close either. But Alonso was saying after the race on turn 11, there was a big screen. And when he was driving through, he was watching the screen sometimes. And he actually came onto the radio at one point and said, "What position is Lance fighting for?" That was a really great move into turn 1. So the fact that he was so comfortable in the car and so happy with how he was driving that he could watch the screen and, like, give feedback and compliment the other driver in his team. Like, I was pissing myself laughing. But it made me so happy. Like, Fernando the team player, because you don't get Fernando the team player all the time. Just look back on his history. Look at the way that he drove with Esteban Ocon when he was still at Alpine. And he's a completely new person in this Aston Martin. And the Aston Martin is just... The fact that Aston are coming second in the Constructors' Championship right now really says something about the way that they've built the car this year and about their drivers. It physically pains me seeing Ferrari so far down on the pecking order in the Constructors. And weirdly, Mercedes has kind of just fallen off this year as well. I know they did fall off last year too with their car. It was just... I don't know what it was, but after the 2021 season and the ending and the way that all finished, which... We're not going to talk about that. Maybe when I get a guest on, we can go into a deep dive and have a controversial discussion about that race. But ever since the end of the 2021 season, Mercedes is just... I don't know what's going on. They just haven't been as good. And I don't know what... I don't know what it is. But it's weird. And... As much as I don't like George and as much as I don't like Lewis, I'd love to be able to see them doing better. Those cars are just, they're getting better. They're better now than they were at the start of the season, but it's just, they're not the same cars that they used to be. And it's a little bit strange. And I'm interested to see what upgrades and what things change during the season and whether they get better. The same with the Ferraris. I really want to see them get better. And I really want to see the McLarens get better as well. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the car this year, but McLaren are really struggling. They did great in Melbourne, which is what happened last year as well. Daniel and Lando both finished in the points last year in Melbourne. As with this year, they both... Oscar and Lando both finished in the points. Oscar, luckily, because of the Alpines taking each other out. But... The McLarens do really well in Melbourne. I don't think they did... Lando was in the points in Baku. And, Oscar was almost in the points in Baku. But then you get them into Miami and there was just nothing there. The McLarens both finished... Lando finished in 17th and Piastri finished in 19th. So I don't know what it is about the pace of the McLarens. I don't know what's going on there. I really hope that they have some upgrades coming throughout the season that make the car better. But they're struggling and it's really upsetting to see. And the same with Logan Sargent. That kid has so much potential and he could be doing so much better and he's just not. You would have thought that with Miami that he would be... he would have more motivation to do better considering he grew up in Fort Lauderdale, which is quite close to Miami. And it was, his home race. He's got 2 more home races in his home country this season to kind of do better, but I don't know what it was about them. Now that we've got the races out of the way, I have a little theory that I would like to put to you guys, and I wish absolutely no meanness and no awfulness and no bad luck on anybody, but this is my theory, okay? Nick de Vries somehow managed to fluke his way into the car after a great performance last year at, I want to say it was at Monza, 99% sure it was at Monza, I apologize if I'm wrong, and he had a brilliant drive filling in for Alex Albon when he had his appendix out, and I think he kind of fluked his way into a seat this year because he's just not performing and he's doing terribly. And the fact that, in Miami, he also crashed into the back of Lando Norris at the start of the race. Yeah. And so we know that AlphaTauri is a sister team for Red Bull, and Red Bull have always been quite cutthroat in dropping and replacing drivers when they aren't performing. Max Verstappen replacing Danny Kvyat halfway through the season because Kvyat wasn't performing. The quick change between Gasly and Alex Albon for the same reasons because Gasly wasn't performing in that car, and then they put Albon in halfway through the season and he just wasn't doing that well either. So my theory, or more my hope, and I'm sorry Nick de Vries, but maybe you need a little bit more time in the simulator and maybe you can come back next year and hopefully not be as terrible as you have been. But my hope, and we're going to finish the video here, my hope for halfway through the 2023 season is that Nick de Vries doesn't perform as well as everybody hoped, and Daniel Ricciardo gets that seat in the AlphaTauri for the rest of the season. That's my dream. I would love for that to happen. It's highly unlikely that it'll happen, but I kind of want it to happen. I'm sorry, Nick de Vries. I don't want to wish any harm on you, but please either get your shit together or get out. Like, I'm sorry, but you need to improve, and you need to improve drastically, because somebody with your experience should not be performing as badly as you are. And yeah, so that's my dream, is that Nick de Vries gets replaced by Daniel Ricciardo halfway through the season, just because there's no way that Daniel Ricciardo is getting in the Red Bull anytime soon, unless Checo or Max miraculously decide that at the end of this year they're going to retire, which is highly unlikely. Another discussion I had with a friend a couple days ago was that Max is kind of saying things that make it sound like he's going to retire at the end of this year. I personally don't agree with that. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. So watch this space. Hopefully I haven't just wished terrible luck on Nick de Vries for the rest of the season. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, all the things. Share it with your friends. And I will see you guys in a little under 4 weeks after Spain and before Canada.